We're going to take you through a series of 7 training modules that make up a comprehensive introduction to Jira. We're covering the core concepts, the building blocks that make up the Jira application. This isn't focused on any particular development methodology like Agile or Waterfall, and we're not going to go into configuration or advanced setup features in Jira. We just want to cover the basics, get you up to speed on the fundamentals, and show you how to start using Jira to the best of its abilities. So 7 modules. In this first module we're looking at installing Jira and the concept of Jira issues, and in the subsequent 6 modules we're going to start looking at projects, labelling and prioritising your issues, how to set up workflow and status to control your issues, and then we'll move on to categorising and grouping issues in versions and components in module 5. And in 6 and 7 we'll start to look at how to create dashboards and reports, and how to use the advanced search features and a language called JQL in Jira to get you searching and finding all the issues that you need to focus on. As we said, in this module we want to give you the basic understanding of what a Jira issue is, but before we can do that we need to look at how to install Jira so that you have a workspace or a sandpit area to practice and learn on. So in the next section we're going to look at installing Jira on an AWS server. You can use any server you like or your local desktop, but we want to walk you through each individual step so that you have an environment in which you can practice and learn Jira. Just quickly before we start looking into the installation of Jira, 2 things. What is Jira and what is an issue? Well, Jira is a issue tracking application developed by a company called Atlassian, and it allows you to track bugs, defects, units of work in projects, and more specifically agile projects. It's all focused around the concept of an issue, and an issue is or can be thought of as a record used to track just an individual autonomous or atomic piece of work. Everything on Jira is built up from that concept of an issue record. And by the end of this module, what I want you to grasp is that concept of creating an issue, what an issue is, and how Jira stores and tracks and creates those issues. But before we get ahead of ourselves though, let's set up an instance of Jira locally or on an AWS server in this instance, so that we've got a sandpit to learn in and an environment to experiment with. What we need to do next then is install Jira. So we can search the web for download Jira, pick one of the first links, Atlassian software Jira download, not unsurprisingly, and from here we get the 30-day unlimited user trial. It picks your operating system automatically, click the download link, executable gets downloaded, double click on the executable and off goes the install. The wizard for the install is pretty straightforward. You can select most of the defaults on that wizard. Clicking next. Go for the express install. We're not configuring a full production Jira instance here, we're just setting up a sandbox for us to play in. And click on the install and leave the Jira install process to itself for a minute or 2. We get to the end of the install, click next, start the software, and again short delay whilst Jira launches all the background processes, and then we're into the license configuration stage. And we get 2 options at this point. Let Jira configure everything for you, or set it up and configure it yourself for a production type environment. We're just going to go with the set it up for me. We continue on to the My Atlassian site where we need to create a user account for Atlassian if you haven't already got one, and then we get the server ID and the license trial to download and install. So we'll go for Jira software, select the Jira software server because we're installing it locally, put the trial or organization name in there, and it automatically picks up a server ID and generates a license and will install that license. You do have to create, when you go through it, your own Atlassian user account, which means entering some account details, getting a sign up link, clicking on that link, and then proceeding through the server license generation stage. Once we've got the license installed, we need to set up a user account, an admin account, with password, username and email address. And once we've entered that, Jira will go through a couple of stages to set up a database, install some plugins and configure the environment. Once that's done, Jira will prompt us to finish the setup with a couple of questions about how we want to configure our environment. So we're ready to go. Click on the Let's Get Started button. And the first thing Jira is going to ask us is which language we're interested in completing the install with. So I'll select English and continue. Choose an avatar. But on this page, what we want to do is create our first project. So we could go with a sample project, we could import a project, but we want to create a clean new project. And just to illustrate the types of projects that we can set up here. So we can go with Scrum, Kanban, basic software development, and some other project types that are provided by default out of the box by Jira. But what we want to go with is project management because it's the simplest one out of the lot. So if we click project management, select next, and it gives us an indication of the workflow. So this is the stages that an issue you create will go through. And as you can see here in project management setup, we've got just 3 stages to do: in progress and done, which is simple enough for us to get started with. Select continue, and then we need a project name, something inspirational like project 1. And you'll notice that Jira gives it a key. So this will be the key that prefixes all of the issues we create, their unique ID. Best to keep this to letters and use only 3 or 4 letters in this instance. Click submit. And from there we're on our initial project start page with a list of our open issues. And of course, no open issues at this stage because we haven't created our first issue. And that's the next step, is to look at creating our first issue within this project. Before we create our first issue, let's just think about what an issue is and what it contains. As I've said before, it's a way of tracking a unit of work when you define an issue. And there are 2 aspects to that unit of work you might want to track. One, shown in orange here, is the information about the work we need to complete. So some summary, some description, maybe attachments, documents, etc. Anything that's relevant to us completing that unit of work. Second aspect then is some properties, highlighted in blue here, that we can use to help us categorize and track and group and organize all of our issues. So for example, we have a status value. This one's in doing. We might have a priority. This is a medium priority, and some assignment in terms of who reported it and who it's assigned to at the moment. So a Jira issue, when you create it, is always broken down into 2 areas. That is the information about the unit of work and the properties that are going to help us track and categorize that issue. So taking that, let's now go and look at creating our first issue in our newly installed Jira software. And it's pretty obvious how we start the creation process for our initial Jira issue. Click on the create button, and within the project that we've just created, we will get the dialog box and the form for completing our first issue. And this consists of the project that the Jira issue is assigned to, the type of issue, and we'll talk about types in a later stage, but within this project we only have 1 type of task, a summary which we'll enter, our first issue. We have the reporter, which defaults to the logged in user, which is me, a due date we can assign, and then some description about our issue or unit of work. There are 2 names associated with this issue we're creating: the reporter, who's created it, the assignee, the person that we're planning to carry out the work, and I can assign that to myself with the assign to me link. We can give the issue at a priority, and by default we've got highest, high, medium, low and lowest. Stick to medium for now, and then some labels which we'll talk about in a future module. Labels are optional, but we need to configure those and enter some labels to categorise and organise our issues at a later stage. We can, if we like, add some estimates in terms of days, hours, weeks that it might take us to complete this unit of work, and also some remaining estimates when we come to update these issues. Click on the Create button and Jira goes off to create our first issue. That first issue is given a unique ID based on the project code. So you'll see there it was PRJ1 from that pop-up, but also you'll see if you want to link straight to that issue that it's listed in the drop down for issues under our recent issues. But if I refresh this project page, what we should see now is that our first issue is now listed within our project. So the left-hand column contains some of our project navigation components, which we'll look at in a future module. This larger left-hand column is a list of all of the open issues within that project, and then the right-hand panel shows us the detail for that particular issue we've selected here. So this is our first issue, and there's just a few things worth pointing out on this. Firstly, top of the issue is the path to that issue. So there's always a Jira path to the issue and a unique ID, PRJ1 in this instance. You can right click on that and copy the link, and you can use and paste that link to get to that Jira issue in emails, in chats, etc., etc. You can update any of the fields just by clicking on them. So we can click in here and update the summary, our first new issue. We can click on the description and update some text of the description. And we could change the assignee if we wanted to by clicking on the assignee. We can modify the labels, the priority, all of the fields within here we can update directly by clicking on the fields themselves. I'll also point out that we've got the status value, which is associated with a workflow, and it starts off in to do, but if we click on view workflow, we can see the workflow that these issues within this project will follow. And that is a pretty simple workflow of to do, which can then move to an in progress state. And once we've completed the work, it can move from in progress to done. And we can go back through those steps from done to do or from done to in progress. But essentially at this stage, this status value of to do allows us to view and list all of our issues that are in an open to do state. In the right hand panel, we'll see that the issue was reported by the reporter, which was me in this instance. And we'll see that it's assigned to myself as well, but we could click on that link and assign that to somebody else if we need to from the drop down. And that's it. We've installed Jira. We've created our project and we've created our first issue within that project. And in the next module, module 2, we'll start to look at how we can organise our issues by grouping them in projects, and we'll look at the overall concept of projects in a little more detail and see how we can categorise and assign different issues to different projects.